Well, this is definitely a different audience than the sixth graders I usually speak to down here. But we'll see. We'll see. Very good. Right. They too were talking about underpants, but they had step 2 figured out, which is good. Very good. All right. Well, again, I'm Mary McMurray. I'm the director of the White House Decision Center here, and I'm also a PhD candidate at the University of Kansas, where I got to work with a lot of people in the military, and they've become actually some of my best friends. And amongst us, we have this. I have to start with history. We have this book that we all love. It's called Robert Wiebe's The Search for Order. And it was published in 1967, and you wouldn't think it had a lot of relevance to people studying cultures and studying history. I study Army wives. But for all of us, it ended up having a great, it was very powerful to us. The subject of the book is about progressives, and Wiebe says the progressives aren't backward-looking elites looking to shore up their hegemony by doing all of their reforms in the era. Instead, these are these forward-looking members of the emerging middle class looking to secure their place in society. And in doing so, they establish bureaucracy to find order to this chaotic new modern world. And they replace the values of small-town community life with the assumptions of a bureaucratic order. And the title of the book, The Search for Order, the reason why this is so important is that it's not a solution. They didn't find a solution. They found a perpetual search. And in doing this perpetual search, it's a continuous management of society. And so for all of us, this book that's reviewed as chilling becomes very important to us. It's chilling because the bureaucratic order that Wiebe's progressives ushered in only ends with, it's all about establishing order and control. And because bureaucracy's job is to manage the system and manage the problems, it neutralizes the unexpected. That's what it's set to do. And sometimes that results in tunnel vision or a lack of creative future possibilities. Sometimes of the solutions getting gobbled up in the democratic system. And so it becomes this joke for us. Every other book we read throughout our entire PhD, Wiebe. Any other history we hear, Wiebe, because the system, it gets gobbled up and perpetuated. It ordered all of our thinking. And so when Daria asked me to participate in this and speak to you all a little bit, I couldn't be more thrilled because this very book is so at the heart of almost everything I studied. And I see you all as the anti-Wiebeans. You know, we always say Wiebe wobbles, but he won't fall down. You all might actually get it to fall down a little bit by reordering the system. And I also was thrilled to come here and speak to you all because Truman is such a fascinating topic for me, but I hadn't thought of him as a system disruptor until I had the opportunity to write this speech that hopefully doesn't flop. So we will see how that goes. When I started to think about it and speak to Truman's grandson and some other people about, some historians about Truman changing the system, I started to realize that he actually had been challenging the system most of his life. When he was a young man, he wanted to go to West Point actually, and he passed the test with flying colors. He should have been able to get in, but he was blind as a bat. And he couldn't pass the eye exam, so he can't serve. I'm an guard. I can get in. I can do it. So what he does is he goes into practical and neutral, very useful. They had 432 public hearings, 1,798 witnesses, 2,000 pages of reports, and the result is one of the most successful investigative efforts ever mounted in the U.S. government. He saved the U.S. government 10 to 15 billion with a B, dollars in military spending. He ends up on the cover of Time magazine in March 1943 as Investigator Truman. And this is launching him to get on the radar to become vice president. See, disrupting the system sometimes can actually help you and launch you into future successes. In his presidency, he goes from challenging orders and kind of tweaking things to fundamentally changing the system because he's our chief executive, right? He has the power to do this. When we recently had Bill Moyers here speaking at our Bennett Forum, and Bill Moyers says that accidental presidents tend to be the most progressive presidents. It's not about the opportunity given to the person, but about the opportunities taken. That was part of the theme of his talk. And so here's Truman, a man who didn't want to be president, who had met with his president one time, a president who had led our country through depression and war. Sometimes for some people who were, let's see, I guess they would have been 12 or older, or 12 or younger, the only president they had ever known. Here comes Truman to step in. He doesn't even know about the existence of the atomic bomb, and he must figure out what to do. There are some factors, some characteristics of him that kind of help him as he's challenging conventional thinking and assuming this presidency. He's inherently a creative thinker, as we've showed from his past. He has a strong knowledge and respect for the past. He was very well read. That blindness made him not be able to play sports. His mom and dad couldn't afford an extra pair of glasses for him, so he was a big reader from that. He also has a strong sense of what is right, and he has a willingness to listen to other sides, and I think this is the most important one. His willingness to listen to other sides is his indicator that he's willing to consider alternative ways of thinking. He has an infamous saying, or a famous saying, a yes man in my White House is worthless, and he really meant that. You didn't go to a meeting just to say, yes, sir, I agree with you. You went to the meeting to challenge him, and he loved to have that happen. During his nearly 8 years as president, he faced major challenges domestically, internationally, also politically. But in addressing the challenges of his time, President Truman dramatically changed U.S. Domestic and foreign affairs. Few examples. I'm going to choose the ones that we work with here at the White House Decision Center. The first one, civil rights. After World War II, Truman becomes horrified seeing our African-American veterans returning from war who had fought bravely and being met with discrimination and even violence. Isaac Woodard is a great example. He was a World War II veteran. The South Carolina Police Department attacked him in 1946. It was just hours after he was discharged from the Army. He was still in uniform. The attack left him permanently blind. So Truman says this and all the other violence he saw is not right. So he uses the executive order privilege, Executive Order 9808, and he establishes the Committee on Civil Rights. He says, investigate the status of civil rights in the country and propose measures to strengthen and protect them. What they come out with is this nice, really great report, 178 pages, called To Secure These Rights. And they propose, among other things, improving the civil rights laws. Let's not forget, this is when the Do-Nothing Congress was elected in 1946. They continued and served all the way through till today. But here we go, right? We got to get a few jokes in here with all the history. A little sugar makes the medicine go down. So he's not going to be able to get this through the legislative power. He has to be creative and figure out another way to do it. There's two things that he does. He does Executive Order 9980, and this is where he desegregates the federal workforce. But the one that's most relevant is Executive Order 9981, which is where he desegregates the military. He had many meetings with his staff and advisors. Secretary of the Army Royale was particularly opposed to this decision. Not only is he from Southern roots, he also was the leader of the Army, and he knew that the Army, the way it has always worked, will continue to work. We've just won 2 world wars with segregated forces. Why would we change it? There's no need to change it. Truman finally got him convinced, I'm going to change it. So Royale comes back to him again. Okay, great. Let's do a test unit. Let's then do a study. He's trying to delay the process. And Truman says, absolutely not. It's all or nothing. We're doing it all the way through. In addition to issuing the orders as commander-in-chief, Truman brings this forward to the public. He addresses Congress in February 1948, and he puts civil rights as part of an effort to strengthen our democracy and improve the welfare of our people through extending civil rights. In doing so, he makes it part of our foreign policy. He connects it to the Cold War. Everything's connected to the Cold War during this time, but he connects it to it. Basic civil rights, he says, are the source and the support of our democracy. If we wish to inspire peoples of the world whose freedom is in jeopardy, if we wish to restore hope to those who have already lost their civil liberties, if we wish to fulfill the promise that is ours, we must correct the remaining imperfections in our practice of democracy. We know the way, we need only the will. Look at how he's using the military as an agent of social change. He doesn't want it to stop the military's borders. He wants it to usher it in. He also becomes the first president to address the NAACP. Again, it's legitimizing the issue of equality and the importance of it. This becomes all the more revolutionary when you think about Truman's background. He was raised by Southern parents, slave-owning grandparents on both sides. His mother comes to the White House when he's president, and he says, Mom, I've got such a treat for you. You're sleeping in the Lincoln bedroom tonight. And she looks at Bess, Harry's wife, and says, Bess, pack my bags, I'm going home. After his mom died, he jokes that she died unreconstructed. And yet from this perspective, this way of thinking, he ends up becoming the person who uses the political power of the commander-in-chief to make this massive change in our system. And he does it in an election year when he knows he's going to split the political party. His personal growth and political courage shows that great countries make mistakes, but they also own up to their mistakes and address it. He did. He's paving the way towards that. He says the only limit to America's achievement should be his history and character. And in doing this brave decision, he sets a trajectory for future civil rights leaders. When people think of civil rights, it's hard not to think of the Civil Rights Act. And when we had Bill Moyers here, he tells a great story of LBJ. When he finds out he's going to be president, he's still in his Senate office, hasn't moved over to the White House yet. And Moyers is in the office. And there he sees LBJ just staring right past him at the wall. And he keeps looking at Mrs. And he keeps looking and he says, what's you don't do that. Moyers looks again, there's no chalkboard. And so he says, what is that? And he says, well, it's got all the president's handwriting on it. And he was having a vision, some sort of like, you're entering into history, the executive branch here. And what Moyers' entire argument of the speech he gave here was that Truman's handwriting was bigger than anyone else's. It was the largest influence for him in working forward to civil rights. And in doing this through the military, I think Truman set the precedent of the military continuing to set the precedent, being at the forefront of social change. Switching gears now to foreign policy, we obviously have the Truman Doctrine, which shapes our views as far as our relationship to the world, and reoriented our foreign policy. The Truman Doctrine, it must be the policy of the U.S. to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressures. So he takes care of that and works and sets, again, the precedent there. The Marshall Plan, rebuilding Western Europe, this is another massive thing that he does. And it's the most revolutionary thing to me there is that he doesn't even, it's not just that he's rebuilding his allies, he's also rebuilding our former enemies. The commitments that he sets up, like those in South Korea, the Middle East, and Asia, continue to today as well. But the one that we deal with here is the Berlin Airlift. And this is a great story of innovation and challenges that are overcome. After the Soviets blockade the city of Berlin in the middle of the Soviet sector, Truman is faced with a decision of what to do with the cold and starving Berliners. Should the U.S. respond? Yes, he decides that we should. And his unconventional strategies as commander-in-chief led, I think, to others in the military doing the same things. For example, there's obstacles related to weather landing in Berlin. Any pilots in the room? Weather getting through down that way. And they also had to build a new airport, Tegel Airport. This is a story of international coordination and effort. For example, the French really helped us in this one. There was a radio tower, the Soviets, we couldn't negotiate to get them to take it down. And so the French invite all of the American decision makers to a very fancy luncheon, wine, food, everything's great. And the Americans come in and they lock the doors. Uh-oh, what's about to happen? Oh, sit, eat, drink, be French with us, right? Everything works out very well. And then so they're all sitting there eating, and wouldn't you know it, lo and behold, we have, I hear my voice coming back to me. That's really annoying. Sorry, you all have to listen to it for so long. They hear an explosion, and you go and you look, and the French have blown up this radio tower for us and given an alibi so that it doesn't lead to a direct U.S.-Soviet conflict after that. What a great way of having some innovation. We also are building the runways by hand using German civilians to do it. Bulldozers were largely in the Soviet sectors. We can't get them over in our cargo planes. You can if you cut them apart. Make sure you number the pieces so you'll know to weld them back together in the right way. This is what they do. They were stacking planes. If you missed your landing, you were going to come back. They were stacking planes up high, and it was leading to what was called Black Friday. Planes stacked forever, extreme risk for mid-air collisions. William Tunner comes in as one of the most innovative people at the time. He streamlines the efficiency, saying no stacking, you get one shot. If you land, you circle back to base. Planes are all going to fly at the same altitude, the same speed, and again, the one chance to land. The result, we end up having one plane landing every 45 seconds at Tempelhof Airport. That comes with its own host of new problems. For example, how do you unload all of these planes and all of that cargo? We decided we'd use some Berliners to help out with that plan. And in turn, we gave them rations. They set a record. They can unloaded an entire 10-ton shipment of coal from a C-54 in 10 minutes. They continue to decrease that number after then. They also say, but wait a second, we're getting so fast at getting these planes unloaded and the pilots aren't here. It's time to get them off. How do we do that? And so what they end up doing is they go and they say, let's get some pretty German women, give them cigarettes, coffee, and food. Those pilots aren't going anywhere if those girls are staying close to the plane. And wouldn't you know, that happens too. As he concludes his presidency, Truman is at very low approval rating, and it takes a long time for him to be redeemed. Historians see him in the top 5 presidents now. And how do we get that big change over time? Well, we historians are really smart, which is part of the reason why we picked Truman for the top 5. But it's also, I think, because great changes, massive changes to the system, disrupting the system comes with massive resistance to it. People don't like change. They don't like challenges to established orders of thinking. So it takes some time and perspective to get him to a point where we can say, okay, yes, he is one of the top 5 presidents. If you'd like to see the first ushering, the first wave of Harry Truman establishing this change in view, read his farewell address in 1948. He says, when history says that my term in office saw the beginning of the Cold War, it will also say that in those 8 years, we have set the course that we can win it. We have succeeded in carving out a new set of policies to attain peace, positive policies, policies of world leadership, policies that express faith in other free people. We have averted World War III up to now, in sense, and we have already have succeeded in establishing conditions which can keep that war from happening as far ahead as man can see. These are great and historic achievements that we can be proud of. Think of the difference between our course now and our course 30 years ago. I think as you all think about remaking the system again, as you understand how we can change our orientation both domestically and foreign policy, as you think about changing systems, Truman's legacy is more important now than ever before. He reorganized for a globalized world at the time with modernity that people could not even fathom. We have a new world at this point in time, and we have new things to try and figure out how to order. I think looking back to Truman a little bit as he looked back to those before him is a great way to think about how you can challenge the system in a productive, in a wonderful way that will hopefully lead us to even more security and safety in our futures. So thank you.